Morning. So just a few things before I get started on this. When I started gardening with my parents, and they already had flower beds. And then I moved off and lived in brick houses, and they had flower beds. And then I moved into a house that I bought, and it had flower beds. So everywhere I went, there were existing flower beds. Now some of them were in good shape, some of them weren't in great shape, but I never had to do anything that was a new build, so to speak. So when I went to the museum and they asked me to help out a little bit, and I said, sure. I really did not know what I was getting into. So I'm just saying. So some background on the Wasp and the Wasp Museum real quick, in case you don't know. The Women Air Force Service pilots were established during World War II to carry out non-combat flying duties here stateside. There were about 1,000 of them. The duties included everything from ferrying aircraft. They flew over 60 million miles ferrying aircraft, trained pilot and flight crews, and helped with advanced combat training. They did some of the most dangerous training jobs out there, like pulling targets for live gunnery practice. One of those jobs I would have said, no, thank you. They did things, and the Army was quite honest about the fact that we can't afford to lose men, we can't afford to lose male pilots. We'll use the women for this. Vast majority of these women did train in adventure fields. People ask all the time, why is the museum here in the middle of nowhere? Well, that's where they trained. There were a handful of women who had enough experience early on that they did pretty much on-the-job training. There were 2 classes that graduated out of Ellington Field in Houston, but they realized Ellington was too busy and too crowded, and there were no facilities for women. They needed something that was going to be exclusively for women. Adventure Field became available, and so they moved them there. In 2005, the museum was established to honor these women. In the beginning, it was just one of the old hangars and a few exhibits. It was done by a former Wasp and her daughter. Nowadays, it's a much more formal kind of museum. We have 2 buildings now, 4 aircraft, all of which do fly. We've got multimedia stuff in there, hands-on kinds of stuff. We do tours. Last year, I got to do a tour for the female pilots and crews that fly Air Force One. So that was kind of cool. I enjoyed that. I became involved in the museum in 2022. That was shortly after I retired. I kept going to air shows with my husband and son. Kept seeing the director, Lisa, and she kept saying, when you retire, you need to come help me. So after about a year of being retired, I was kind of starting to get bored. I need something to keep me out of trouble, according to my husband. And so this is one of the things that I started doing. And I do a lot of different things. I help in the gift shop mostly. I do tours. Occasionally I do speaking engagements if they need me to. But one of the things I ask them to do is help with landscaping. So this is an aerial shot I got off of Google Earth of the facility, so you kind of have an idea of what we have here. So this is the original hangar. It was built in 1929. This hangar was built almost 8 years later. And that's what we call the new hangar, or Hangar 1. These are really large buildings. It's kind of hard for people to understand. Think aircraft hangar, because that's really what they are. This area in here has decomposed granite. And then we have some beds here. There's one here, one over here, and then this is grass, more or less. And parking lot. You'll notice that there's a pretty significant incline here. They've got these little things to help water run off. This drop off is pretty significant. It's hard to mow with a tractor because it's pretty steep. This is all built up at one point or another when they built the original hangar. We are on top of a hill and it does impact us a bit. Okay. So here you can see, kind of looking back from the area between the hangars, and you can kind of see that it drops off pretty well there. We're actually doing some new landscaping. If they're doing a professional landscape thing in here, they're going to put some turf in, some pavers, because we do move aircraft out of the hangar number 1, and those that are on this side, they move out through that courtyard area. So when the museum added their second building, that's when they decided to do some landscaping. And so they hired a local landscaping company to do what's called a low maintenance landscape. And when you hear of low maintenance landscape, what that means is they're going to put down a whole bunch of heavy duty landscape fabric, thank you. Brain's not working. Landscape fabric, and then they're going to put rocks and cactus. Okay? That is low maintenance landscaping. You're not going to have to water it. Okay? And for 2 to 3 years, you won't have to weed it. Alright? Now here's the problem with landscape fabric. Yes, unless you're talking Bermuda grass, generally speaking, landscape fabric will prevent any seeds or plants underneath it from coming up through it. Okay? What it will not prevent is seeds that have blown in on top. Now, for the first couple of years, there's not anything there except the rock. But what happens in West Texas? The wind blows. And when the wind blows, the dirt flies. And 2 to 3 years down the road, you're going to have enough soil on the top for seeds to germinate. Now, those roots, they can grow through that landscape fabric. Okay? See, you can't come up, but those roots can go down through them, and they will. Plus, you always have these little edges here, right? And that's where we get a lot of it. Now, this right here was taken pretty early on. They still were having a lot of trouble with weeds. It was just starting to be a problem when I came along and started to help them. Now, this planting was done in the fall of 2020. That's important. Do you remember what happened in January, February of 2021? Yeah, the big freeze. The blizzard of 21. And so a lot of the stuff that they planted didn't survive. Not because it couldn't handle cold temperatures, it just wasn't established yet. Like knockout roses. Okay, so one of the first things I had to deal with was drainage. So I picked one bed to work on first. It was a pretty good sized bed. It's at the front corner of the parking lot. It sticks out from the building just a little bit. I didn't think a whole lot about it, but it has no protection from the wind or the sun. It has sun on it all day long, and the wind blows across it all day long. Okay? So I decided on this one because it's right there at the front. I thought, well, it looks awful. I need to do something so when people drive into the parking lot, it'll look nice. Well, the first thing I noticed was we had a gully, a pretty significant one right here, because there's no gutters on those buildings. Water hits them, they run off. They run down the sidewalk, get here. There's a slope here, and there's a significant slope here. Water's always going to take path of least resistance, right? So what would happen is it would start to run this way, and then it would run here. And you can see there's water drainage here. There's drainage along this metal edging, but this was the big one, okay? And then you have this is Mexican feathergrass that they had planted. And I thought the Mexican feathergrass had been killed by the freeze, and it may have. But we also began, as we started to dig and plant some things, we started finding more Mexican feathergrass that was literally just covered up by dirt because of the wash. All the dirt that was being washed over. So when that started happening, I told my husband we've got to do something about the drainage. So I'll show you that in a minute. So this is the knockout roses. There were 5 or 6. There were 2 red yuccas. Now the yuccas back here did fine. They got a little bit of protection from the hanger. There's another bed back there with some more. They were fine. The bed on the other side, on the west side, it doesn't stick out in front. It's actually tucked back just past the front edges, right even with the building. And that's just enough protection from the wind and enough protection from the sun that most of the plants there survive. Look fine. Matter of fact, these knockout roses are looking great. I'm just hoping we don't get rose rosette and things go down pretty quick. These, only one of them even came out a little bit at the base, and I was like, we don't have time to wait for this thing to recover. It's going to take a while. So we pulled them all out. Even one of the red guys did not make it that one. And then here, of course, you can see that Mexican feathergrass. Again, you can see the gully. You can see the wash coming around here. So we put in a dry creek bed in the existing gully just to prevent it from washing out anymore. We had to experiment a little bit with the rock placement in order to make sure that it was low enough at the top that the water could come into the flower bed here, build up these rocks a little bit here, so again, we're directing the water. It took me a little bit to figure it all out. A couple of good rains, but it was definitely better after that. We still have some wash. You can see I actually lowered the creek edge here to try to get some of that water in here. So it's still not perfect. I'm still working it a little bit. We did do some terracing. It wasn't anything formal. It was basically coming to where it seemed like an edge or a ledge and putting some rocks in there, and the soil's washing up against it, and hopefully it helps to slow things down a little bit. And it does seem to be better. Again, it's not perfect because all my blue bonnets came up at the bottom of the hill. Not all of them, but a lot, the vast majority of them. The seed just washed. So we're still working on that, but it is getting better. Okay, so one of the things I did is I planted some frog fruit at the top. You can see this picture was taken probably last fall, and there's a lot of different vegetation in there. We'll talk about kind of what's in there and what I'm doing with that here in a minute. But one of the things I did is I planted frog fruit. Now, I knew about frog fruit. I had some frog fruit in my flower bed. It's a good native ground cover. I wasn't sure if it handled this. Okay, all day Texas sun, all day, morning to night. And then I was at an air show in Midland, and I noticed some frog fruit growing up in a crack in the tarmac, and it looked lovely. Okay, if it can grow up in the middle of an airport like that, it can grow where I am. So, several reasons why I decided to use it. It's a native ground cover. I like native stuff. I'll talk about why in here in a little bit. It helps to hold the soil. I have read several articles about it. It was good for embankments. It works as green mulch. At least so far it is. We're going to see. One of the things about something being this hardy, sometimes that ends up being a little aggressive. So we'll see how that works. It's a good host for butterflies. There's probably about 4 different butterflies that use it as a host plant. And a couple of them use it as a secondary host plant. It's not the first choice, but caterpillars can survive on it. It provides good nectar. It needs very little water. I knew when it was on that at Midland, it's not getting any water except when it rains. So it doesn't need a whole lot of water. It does look better when I do give it a little bit of irrigation, but I don't irrigate much. One, there's no irrigation system. That means I got a little hose. And at the airport where at the hangar, the spigots are pretty far apart. So that means pulling hose from a long distance. So I don't water very often. And it can handle full all day Texas sun, which is different from like Minnesota sun, Indiana sun, things like that. So that's up the top. It does seem to be helping to hold the soil. I'm hoping it'll spread some more. It does die back in the wintertime, especially this winter when we hit 9 degrees one night. It was still fairly green even after a couple of freezes, but that 9 degrees definitely knocked it back. But it's coming back. It'll just take some time. Okay, so poor soil was another problem. The previous landscapers used the existing dirt. Notice I said dirt, not soil. Okay? I was talking to a guy down at Junction. He works for Native American Seed. And I had called them and asked them if they would be interested in coming out and doing, kind of looking at the thing and kind of giving me some advice. And he says, well, y'all are a nonprofit, you can't afford this. He said, but what I can do is I can get on Google Earth, I can kind of look at what you've got, and we can do a phone conference, and that won't cost you anything. I said, great, that's wonderful. So he sent me this picture of all these different colors of soil, and he says, which one of those matches your soil the best? And I'm like, well, it's not number 1, it's not number 2, it's not number 3. 4, 5? It's kind of pink. He goes, okay, yeah, that's not topsoil. He said that's about 4 or 5 layers down. He said that's fill dirt, they just brought it in and they dumped it there, and that's kind of what you have. So I did try doing some things to deal with that, but I did have some issues with it. So it's really, really heavy clay. When I was putting in some of my first plants, coerced my husband. No, I didn't really coerce him. I just got him to come and help me plant. So he brought an auger, because I had a bunch of 1-gallon plants I was going to plant. And so, so he comes out there and he puts the auger in the ground, and it goes down about this far, and then it just spins. Just spins. He pulls it out, and it looks like you have polished porcelain. Okay? And he's like, that's not going to work. I said, pick a different spot. So that's how we found out there were other things that had been planted out there, because we would find a soft spot, that's where a plant had been, because the soil there was from a pot. So we ended up planting in a lot of the same places, but it did take us a while, and it was not easy. I did amend some, but since I was planning on using native plants, I didn't want to get too rich a soil. That's one of the nice things about using natives and wildflowers and things like that is you don't have to have really good soil. They like it a little rocky, they like it a little lean, and so I was a little concerned I didn't want to get it too rich, but I didn't have to worry about that. I really didn't, because nature was going to take care of it not being too rich, so I didn't have to worry about that. So the plan was to use mulch, and then that's when we discovered our next problem, the wind. So the wind only blows in Sweetwater in spring, summer, winter, and fall. I think there was a day in like February where it quit, but other than that, it blows. And we're on top of a hill, so that makes it even worse. I know that last year we had one day where we had 80-mile-an-hour winds. Do you know what happens to decomposed granite in 80-mile-an-hour wind? It blows, and it hits all the windows it hits, by the way, just so you know. So yeah, the wind becomes a real problem that I had not anticipated. I live in Abilene. Come on, I know the wind blows. But it's totally different out there, because there's nothing around that building. The airport's behind us. There are a couple buildings across the street, but even those are set back from the highway. So it's really wide open. If you kind of remember the first picture I showed, the aerial picture, there's nothing there. So we had the mulch challenge. So originally I just used pine bark mulch. I bought it on sale at Lowe's, and I brought it out, and it blew away. In about 48 hours. Now, I'm not going to say it was all gone. I would say about 95% was gone. There was some that was stuck down in some, low spots and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I got to work that day, and our janitor maintenance person, Danny, came. She goes, "The mulch is gone." I said, "What do you mean the mulch is gone?" She goes, "It's all gone." So I look out there and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I can see it. You can kind of see where it blew all the way down." Okay, so that's not working. So I did some research, and they recommended cypress mulch. Now cypress mulch is kind of stringy, and it's supposed to tangle up, and it's supposed to stick together. So I thought, okay, it's not great for the environment because it's not renewable, not very renewable. You have to wait for the trees to grow big. It's more expensive, but hopefully it'll be fine. No, guess what? Cypress mulch blew away. Now this did take longer. It did take longer for the cypress mulch to blow. I would say 2 or 3 months. It was gone. And I already mentioned the decomposed granite blew away, so that was not good. So the only thing I found that didn't blow away is pea gravel, which may or may not be a great mulch. I mean, it kind of depends. It tends to sink down into the ground when it gets wet, so you really need something under it. And I'm planting seeds, so I don't really want anything underneath it. So I do have some pea gravel in some spots where I didn't plan on planting things. But we're going to see how the green mulch does. I'm also going to try, there's a product out, I don't know how long it's been around, but I didn't know about it. It's called mulch glue. You put it in a pop-up sprayer, so we're going to try that. Not necessarily in the front bed, but in the beds that do have a little more protection to see if that will help a little bit. So another problem was it actually blew smaller plants right out of the soil. 4-inch plants bad. Quart plants sometimes. Sometimes they would be, I don't go out to the museum every day. So sometimes, by the time I got back, they were already pulled out and the roots have been exposed so much since they were dead. Sometimes I would notice before it got to that point, and I would take some clay soil, that's real, you make a ball and it's a ball and it stays that way. And I would get it good and wet and kind of pack it around the top to help hold it in sometimes. Sometimes that worked. But you had to be really kind of careful on it. Put rocks around that sometimes helped as well. But it was not something I was anticipating. We actually had some big flower pots, and I put flowers in those. And I'll come in after a good windstorm, and there may or may not still be plants in it. There may or may not still be soil, about this far down. So it's something you just have to deal with. And I put these pictures up here. You can see the flags blowing. But you can also see this is on top of the hill, and it goes down here. Now this is actually higher than the airport. This is over at TSTC. But there's a definite drop off back there. Of course, another thing, wildflower seeds do blow in, but also weed and grass seeds. So sometimes people ask me, what's this like? I said, it's like trying to grow roses in a cotton field. You're going to have everything. And constantly dealing with weeds. I've tried lots of different kinds of things. I tend to be fairly organic, but sometimes you get frustrated and you use the nuclear option. And I have Roundup, I tried vinegar on small plant, horticultural vinegar is really heavy stuff. And if you catch the weeds early enough, horticultural vinegar will work pretty well. Roundup will work for a while, but it's hard to put Roundup out because why? The wind's blowing all the time, okay? So let's talk about my philosophy a little bit on this because you had to get philosophical, okay? This is one of those things you just had to look at and go, well, some things are just not going to work. So a weed is just a plant in the wrong place. So if I have something blows in and it has a pretty flower, it's not a weed. It's a wildflower. And some things blew in that were really kind of pretty. I didn't know them. They're not something that you find in a garden center or anything. And they don't necessarily look good all year round. But they were pretty. They had flowers and so they stay. These are some things that I took a picture of the other day. Now these are planted. This is pink prairie primrose. And I planted and they came up really well. But these were not. This is four-nerve daisy. This is lazy daisy. We've got some blackfoot daisy over there. And there's also, you can't see in this picture, but I've got some milk vetch. That all blew in. It all blew in. So I encourage those things, and I try to get rid of the stuff that's not doing so well. If it gives me a pretty flower, it's not a weed, I already said that. If it's non-native and invasive, it's a weed. I have a little app on my phone, I don't remember what it's called. But one of the things it does tell me, it tells me if stuff is invasive. And if it's something that's foreign and it's not supposed to be here and it's causing problems, then I try to get rid of it. There are some native things that I don't want to grow. Okay? So if it has stickers or burrs, it's a weed. Y'all know what buffalo burr is? Okay? Yeah. Even the flowers have thorns. Okay? The whole thing is just, it looks evil. Alright? And it came up in one of the beds, and I think I got rid of it. We'll see. Get a good rain, and it may be back. But I now know what it looks like. And it's going to be gone. Yeah, exactly. So I do try to control invasives. I do try to control things that I'm going to have trouble with. Now, one of the things I'm not talking about here is so the other challenges of being out in the country and gardening in a place like this. Y'all know what Sweetwater is, right? It's the what capital of Texas? Rattlesnake capital of Texas. I've been really lucky. I've not had contact with the rattlesnake while gardening. I think I make enough noise. I try to let them know heads up that I'm coming. I do look around. We have lots of little spiders, which are fine, as long as they give me some room. I'll let them have a chance to move away. Black widows, no. I'm sorry. If I'm gardening, I don't have to worry about that. Now, I wear gloves all the time. Hopefully that's, will protect me from those. But usually if they're black widows, I go ahead and kill them. We don't want them in the building. We spray for them around the building. I'm trying to keep them from spraying in my flower gardens for various and sundry reasons. But I do have to be careful. I have to watch where I walk and that kind of stuff. I'm aware that snakes are possible because we've had snakes. And we've had rattlesnakes at the museum, not in my flower beds. They were usually found in other places, but still, you have to be really aware of that. Okay. The other thing that's part of my philosophy is if you want to successfully garden for pollinators and wildlife, your garden needs to be messy. Because pollinators and wildlife need shelter. And messy flower beds get them that. Okay? Alright, so here's some things, here's some wildlife that we found. Okay? So lots of butterflies, I can picture lots of butterflies. This is a mountain goldfinch. We had a horny toad. We were so excited. We had a horny toad. I've been telling them for years, quit trying to poison the red ants. If people are from West Texas and they don't know how to stay out of a red ant bin, then they deserve to get bit. I'm just saying. All right? So I got them. They still, in some areas, they still do dock with the mounts, but in the flower areas, they finally started leaving them alone. And we had a horny toad. We saw him repeatedly. I don't know if it's he or she. I just call him he. And it may have been more than one because they don't really wear name tags. So it may be more than one. Unfortunately, they weed whacked my flower bed, and we haven't seen him since. So I'm hoping. I'm making signs. All right. So this is the last thing, the human factor. So last year, I had been gardening out there for about 2 years. So things were starting to get established, things were starting to look good, and then the human factor comes in. So they hired a couple of different companies at different times to do the mowing and to do spraying. And the idea is they're supposed to spray in the areas where I don't have flowers, in those rock areas, okay, along the edges, that kind of stuff. And they're not supposed to mow or weed whack in the flower beds. But, okay, now, well, who knows what that is? That is a bluebonnet. Every Texas kid learns what a bluebonnet is in what? Kindergarten? Yes. Okay? Why in heaven's name would you weed whack a bluebonnet? Now, the master gardeners don't know this story because I was so livid that they had weed whacked. I just had to tell everybody. I was so mad. So, you don't weed whack flower beds, especially not the state flower of Texas. That's just wrong. I don't know where they got these people, but it was awful. And they didn't just do it once, they did it twice. So, the other thing is herbicides blow in the wind. That's another rule to know. So I lost a bunch of plants because they sprayed, and yes, they were several feet away from where they were spraying, but they were spraying on a windy day. And I'm not talking about a little bit windy, I'm talking about a lot windy, okay? If they'd come late in the evening or early in the morning, it probably would have been fine, but it was the middle of the afternoon and it blew all over the place. Now, some things recovered. They got a little bit less of a dose of it, but I did lose some things. Luckily, most of the stuff I lost were things that I had dug up out of my yard and put in the flower beds. So it didn't cost me any money. So here's my plant list of things that I have found that work and don't work. Now I'm listing the things that you can find in a nursery. Some of those unique flowers that just popped up, and I never remember the names of because there's so many of them. I didn't put those on there. So desert willow, I've got 3 desert willows. I had 4. But with the new construction, they ran over 1. At 3, they've done really, really well. They don't take any more water than what I just put out, probably every couple of weeks. They attract butterflies, they attract hummingbirds. We have hummingbirds out there. I've seen them. I've never been able to get a picture because apparently they're very camera shy. So that's done really well. Texas sage has done really well for me. Come on, they grow along the roadsides of Midland, Odessa. If it can grow there, it can grow anywhere. Blackfoot and four-nerve daisy. Both of those are Texas native wildflowers, but you can buy them. The nice thing about Blackfoot daisy and four-nerve daisy is they literally do not take any water whatsoever, and they'll recede, which is what I want out there. The only time I've killed Blackfoot daisy is when I watered it too much. So, and I do have some of it coming up from seed, like I pointed out in that other picture. Frogfruit I mentioned already. Salvia greggii red. Now I planted some of the hybrid salvias, and they did not do very well. They didn't survive. The red is the original. It's the species, and it seems to be hardier. It's dealt with cold better. It's dealt with the lack of water, and it's definitely dealt with lack of rain. Now this one bloomed, and this picture, it looks so much better on my phone than when I put it up here. But this was after a good rain last fall, and it was just a big ball of red. It was gorgeous. Flamicanthus, I've got 2 planted out there. They haven't been out there very long. I dug them out of my yard, and they're doing well. The freeze got them pretty good. And I noticed that there's some branches that aren't leafing back out, but I'll go in and trim those off and do stuff to come up. It's good for butterflies and for hummingbirds. And it literally does not need water and can be in full all day sun and not mind it at all. Greg's Mist, I planted for the butterflies, and it worked. It also spreads, so I planted it in a spot where I gave it plenty of room for it to spread out. Hopefully we'll have a whole area there. The bluebonnets have done well. Almost all of those were planted from seed. Prairie pinks were planted from seed. Gaillardia or firewheel, or we used to call them Mexican blanket, they've done well. Some of the hybrids, not so much. The seeds have come up and done well. And I've had some seeds blow in, so those have done well. I have not planted a lot of non-natives because I just don't, I like to stick with natives. However, these three things I know can handle the heat and have done well. The Vitex is not very big yet, but it put out lots of flowers and looked really, really pretty. It is considered invasive in some parts of Texas, in East Texas and the Hill Country. Here, I have never had an issue with them coming up from seed. And I think it's because I don't water enough. I think if you watered, you would probably have them coming up from seed. Catmint is a Mediterranean herb, and there's a picture of it down here. It makes a mound, and it puts out blue flowers. And again, it doesn't take a lot of water. Butterflies love it. And it will stay green until we have a hard freeze. This year, I had butterflies up until that big freeze in January. Year before that, I had them up until Christmas. So they really, really like it. You can't really see very well. This thing's covered in butterflies. They're American ladies, which you'll see late in fall because they can handle cooler weather than a lot of others. Russian sage. I was starting to get desperate for something that would bloom all summer, and so I got some Russian sages. The first ones I put in, they didn't all survive, but I've got two now that are doing pretty well, and I may try them in some other spots as well as time goes on.
Question.
Yes?
Those plants, are they predominantly perennials?
Yes. Now, if they're not perennials, they'll come back from seed. Blackfoot, yeah. Let me back up for a minute. Yeah. Yes. I do tend to buy perennials and plant perennials because I'm cheap. Right? And I don't have to replace them all the time. Now, in flower pots we put Blue Days. I don't know if you're all familiar with that. It's a little blue flower. It's done really, really well for us. Moss Rose, Portulaca, those have done really well. I tried purple feathergrass, no, purple. Purple grass.
Purple fountain grass?
Yeah, purple fountain grass. It did not do well in our pots. I couldn't keep it watered enough. So we're still experimenting with our flower pots and trying to get them looking pretty good. I put some purple coneflower in the pots. They did pretty well. I don't know if they're going to come back. We'll see. And I put out seed for purple coneflower and I haven't seen any yet. So, of course, lots of times seeds come up, and I'm like, I wonder what that is. Is that something? Sometimes I'll try to take a picture of it, but lots of times if it's small, the computer won't, it doesn't recognize it. Or it gives me something I know it's not. So I'll wait around. If you can see a pretty flower, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I can live with that. And sometimes it's like, no, that's got to go. I do have a lot of problems with field grass blowing. Cotton top and the Threon. I don't mind the Threon because it stays low and it kind of looks pretty when it blows in the wind, but I have to deal with a lot of that blowing in. And anywhere a seed hits, it's gonna germinate. And of course they're hard to get out because their roots go all way down deep. So it's hard to get them out. Usually if I grab a plant after a good rain and I pull with my weight on it, it'll come out of the ground. But I had some of that field grass and it wasn't working even after a good rain. So these are the Wasp hours and some information about that. Come on out and check it out. It's a really nice museum. I think you'll be impressed by it. Especially if you haven't been there in a while. We've got a lot of new exhibits and things along those lines. Do y'all have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
The Gaillardia, am I saying it right? Is that the one that goes out like that with pretty little flowers?
It's one. It sends up a spike, and it's going to have a. I think I've got a picture. Hold on a second. Let's see. Oh, yep. There it is. This one right here. That's Gaillardia.
Okay.
And here's a red one. And one of the red ones is done. That's a hybrid. It's done fairly well. This is threadleaf coreopsis. This is Greg's mist flower. This is catmint here. This is stems off the yucca. I probably should have mentioned some of the flowers a little bit more. Let's see. That's Vitex over here. I think I mentioned the others in this one. I think that was all the pictures of flowers. There's that one again. This is Gaillardia here. This is one of the little, I can't remember what this thing is called, but it has little yellow flowers. It's just covered in little yellow flowers, and then they kind of turn fuzzy. And they don't look all that great in the heat of summer, but let's face it, none of us look that great in the heat of summer. This is Blackfoot Daisy. Again, this is Gaillardia, that fire wheel. There's some yucca in there. Radioactive does pretty well, but you have to deal with it reseeding. One of the things that I had recommended when they started doing the new stuff in the middle of the museum landscape is I had said, you know, why don't you use the hybrid yuccas so you don't have to deal with the seeds and, you know, too many of them coming up all over the place. And half of them are yellow, but the other half are just regular red. So they didn't really listen to me on that one. So that's okay though. I just worked there. In this picture again, it's kind of hard to see. There's a Texas sage here. There's this one. I don't remember what it's called, but it puts up. It gets pretty tall. It has yellow sunflower-looking flowers on it, about like this.
Maximilian sunflower.
It may be. That's not what my app called it, but it's possible that that's what it is. This is standing cypress. I had one standing cypress that came up in a little flower pot in my yard, so I transplanted it, and now I've got them all over that flower bed. So I'm really excited. It reseeded really, really well. You can kind of. This is the seed spike here. It's bloomed out, but it puts out a lot of seeds. Here's that little yellow flower. Like I said, I don't know what it is. I have put a little bit of Mexican feathergrass in it. I put a little bit of pink muley. I really like the way pink muley looks when it fills in. But the pink muley is not done well. It needs a little bit more water than I give it. I should have gone with another muley that doesn't need quite as much water. Pink muley is fairly drought tolerant once it's established, but it was getting established. The ones that I've got now look pretty good. Any other questions? I don't know if I talked my whole 45 minutes like I was supposed to, but usually they have trouble getting me shut up. So I'm going to assume that we've probably done most of the stuff that we need to. So once again, thank you. Appreciate it very much. Come out.